me today, and today I'll talk on the topic of understanding holistically the system of worship of Devatas. The worship of Devatas is present in the broad Vedic tradition. So what is its purpose? How does it work? And how does it relate with Krishna Bhakti? That's what we'll discuss today. Let's begin with some prayers. Om Ajnanamandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Vishnu-prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti-vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya-deshatarine Vancha-kalpatarubhyascha Kripa-sindhu-varevacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So let's look at these words. I'll explain the meaning and then we'll recite a few times. Yajante. Yajante is to worship. Satvikan, those who are in Sattva-guna. Those who are in the mode of goodness. Satvika, Devan. Yajante Satvika Devan.
Yajante Satvika Devan.
Yaksha. Yaksha is some kind of beings who exist between the Devatas and human beings. Rakshamsi. Rakshamsi is the Rakshasas. Rajasaha. So those who are in the mode of passion, Rajoguna, they worship the Yakshas and Rakshasas. Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasam.
Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasam.
Pretan. So Preta is basically a soul who has left the body but has not yet acquired a new body. Bhuta is a soul who has left the body and is not going to acquire a new body. That is in disembodied state for a much longer time. The Preta is one who is on the journey from one body to another. Bhuta is that is their destination for a good amount of time. So Bhuta Ganans Chanye. And the others, they worship these things. Pretan Bhuta Ganams Chanye. Yajante, they worship who? Tamasa Janaha. Those who are in the mode of ignorance. Yajante Tamasa Janaha. Yajante Satvika Devan.
Yajante Satvika Devan.
Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasam.
Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasam.
Pretan Bhuta Ganams Chanye.
Pretan Bhuta Ganams Chanye.
Yajante Tamasa Janaha.
Yajante Tamasa Janaha.
Once together now. Yajante Satvika Devan. Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasam. Pretan Bhuta Ganams Chanye. Yajante Tamasa Janaha. Thank you. So here, Krishna is talking about how there's a correlation between the level of consciousness and the object of worship. What one worships is related with one's object of consciousness. Now there are three modes. Which are the three modes? Goodness, passion and ignorance. The Sanskrit words are Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So you could say these three modes they can be understood in many different ways. They are like three gears of a car. If you are driving a car, so when a car is in a particular gear, it will move in a particular way. In some gears it moves very fast. In some gears they are designed for maybe climbing up a high distance, a lot of energy and power is generated. So there are like three different modes in which our body-mind machine operates. So in Sattva Guna, in general, one is thoughtfully effective. These people make things happen. They think, they plan, okay, I do this, you do that, and then let's things work out. So they make things happen. Those in Rajoguna, they have a lot of desire to do a lot of things, but they're often quite impulsive. They rush into this, they start one thing and they don't consider that factor, that factor, that factor, and then they watch things happen. Oh, I wanted to do this, but this went wrong, that went wrong. Some people, if they're traveling, they don't pack till the last moment properly. Then when they start packing, they put their whole house into the suitcase and then they sit on top of the suitcase. And they're trying to rush out of the suitcase opens and spills out, everything falls out. Oh, what's going on? Okay, so they watch things happen. And then those in tamas, they wonder what happened. They're just not even aware. Just lost inside their own head. They are largely disconnected from reality. There are three broad modes in which people function. And Krishna is saying over here that if somebody is in Sattva Guna, then they will worship the Devatas. They will worship higher beings. If somebody is Rajas, they will worship the Yakshas and Rakshasas. They are not that higher beings basically. And those who are in Tamas, they will worship the Bhutas and Pretas. So now, what Krishna is pointing out is the tendency to worship is there in everyone. It's a universal tendency. Now, sometimes people may say that, how can you people believe there can be a half man, half lawyer? They hear about Narasimha. They may not, they say, I don't believe in a half man, half lion. But then, they are big fans of a half man, half spider. Or a half man, half bat. Or like a half man, half ant. What are all kinds of things. So the idea is that in one sense, attraction to the supernatural. Supernatural is something extraordinary. Is natural. And if that is not directed according to, say, spiritual texts, then it will be directed according to fictional texts. So people will create some character which they want to worship. Now you may say, okay, nobody is doing Aarti of, say, Batman or Superman. Maybe they're not. Maybe not Spider-Man or Batman. But it's like the way they are, some people are fans of these characters. It's like man mana bhav mad bhakto. Constantly thinking about them. There are these comic-cons where people, there is satsanga or asatsanga of all people who are devoted to some particular comic character. And I think just now in UK somewhere a multi-million-dollar Harry Potter museum is being created. So people worship. So that tendency to worship is universal. Now we could worship independent of whether ghosts exist or not. Basically the idea is ghosts, all these beings are supernatural. We don't normally see with our eyes any of these things. Whether they're the gods, whether they're the ghosts, whether they're the demons. We don't see any of them. But there's a tendency to be fascinated to the point of almost worshipping people who exhibit some supernatural characters. So that can be directed toward movie stars, that can be directed toward sports stars. So currently in India the IPL is going on. So sometimes when a player, some players, they become so iconic. If they just come out to practice, there are thousands of people to watch them practice, not even play the match. The practice before the match, there are thousands of people. So that kind of tendency to be attracted is there in everyone. And it can be directed towards different kinds of creatures based on what our level of consciousness is. Now this reflects, when Krishna is saying that different people according to their levels of consciousness be attracted to different beings. Now in scripture, there are things that are descriptive and there are things that are prescriptive. Descriptive means this is how things are done. Prescriptive means this is what you should do. It's a prescription like a doctor. So this particular section, now these two are not the same things. Everything in scripture is not prescriptive. So for example, when Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadacha. Work but do not be attached to the results. That is a prescriptive statement. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. That is, Krishna is directly calling us to do something. So those are prescriptive statements. So 247, 1866, they are prescriptive. But if you consider some statements like we consider, say, Nainam Chinnanti Shastrani Nainam Dahati Pavaka. The soul is not cut by any weapons, soul is not burned by fire. That is a which statement? Descriptive statement. Krishna is describing the characteristics of the soul. So we can say 222 is a descriptive statement. Similarly, this 17.4 is also a descriptive statement. Krishna is not saying that everybody is in the mode of passion has to worship these kind of beings. Or everybody in this mode has to worship. That is the general tendency. And the point of describing this is that the urge to worship is universal. Now, how can that be directed? In a way that a person can be improved, a person can be elevated. Everybody has a tendency to worship someone. Now, if somebody's stars are is somebody's star while growing up is like a movie character who drinks and smokes and does all kinds of terrible things, then that's what they will try to become in future. But somebody's star is maybe some freedom fighter, some person who has worked for society, then that is the values that they can emulate. So the idea, we cannot avoid getting attracted to somebody who is special. Special could be specially good, it could be specially bad also. We cannot avoid getting attracted. The idea is, can we direct this attraction in a healthy way upwards? So in the Vedic tradition, there is a whole, the understanding of divinity is quite subtle and sophisticated. I'll start from a broader perspective. So how I'll do it is, we'll talk in terms of three circles. I'll talk of in terms of broadly world religions. Then within that, I'll talk about the Vedic understanding, broad Vedic understanding. And then within that, I'll talk about the Bhakti understanding. So, after all these understandings, I hope you are still standing. That doesn't become too overwhelming. So see, in the Western traditions, broadly the world's religions can be divided into two categories. Now religions are complicated, so you can't really fit everything into a category, but broadly, there are the Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Christianity and Islam, and there are the Dharmic religions. So the Abrahamic religions, they are often quite history-centered. They are centered on particular characters coming at particular times. So there would be no Christianity if Jesus had not come. There could still have been Krishna consciousness if Krishna had not appeared in the world. Because Krishna still exists, and even before Krishna appeared, Krishna worship was going on. Now, of course, Krishna's appearance is very important. But Krishna comes to teach dharma. Arjuna asking, Prichhami tvam dharma sammojita. So, dharmic tradition, they are more principle-centered. The principles, there are certain timeless principles of living. And those principles are to be taught. Now, again, it is not that history is not important in the principles and dharmic religions. And it is not that principles are not important within the Abrahamic religions also. But what is primarily important? So within the Abrahamic religions, there is the idea that God exists high above. So this is God and this is the human world. And human world. And then in between, could say there is almost like an unbridgeable distance. God is completely different. God exists in a completely different category of being. And there are only very rare occasions when this bridge, the unbridgeable distance is bridged. So that is when say God performs some miracles. So Moses sees a burning bush. And the bush is burning and still the bush is not getting burnt. And so this burning bush is God. Or they say Jesus came and Jesus was considered to be, he called himself Son of God, but many Christians consider him to be non-different from God in some ways. So, or say Muhammad came and gave the Quran. So they have the ideas that there are very rare occasions when this distance between the human and divine is bridged. And because God is so far away, their idea is that humans tend to create substitutes for God. Substitutes who are reachable. Because God is so unreachable. And they say these substitutes will take you away from God. And that's why, because in these traditions, there is one true God. And there are many false gods. And the idea is, the one true God has to be glorified. And therefore, the other false gods, they need to be destroyed. They need to be exposed. And in their tradition, the idea is that because God is so otherworldly, He cannot be represented by any image. So in their tradition, the very idea, as soon as you make an image, that itself means it's a false God. And if you see right from the Old Testament, when things like David, the David and Goliath story is very common, about how a small person can overpower a big person. That is a wonderful part of the story. But even kings like David, when he would conquer a kingdom, the first thing he would do is go to the temples of all the false gods and then destroy all those false gods. And that is what we see in the Charitamrita also of kings like Aurangzeb did in India. So their idea is there's one true God and many false gods. And it is specifically said that God is a jealous lover. If somebody is a jealous lover, they are very possessive. You should not be with anyone else. So the idea is that thou shalt not bow down to any other gods. Thou shalt not bow down to idols. So that is among the commandments. So that's why they treated all these others as false gods. And now before the Abrahamic religions were there, so before Christianity came, Judaism was there. And while Judaism was relatively small and growing, there was the Greco-Roman tradition in Europe. Now in the Greco-Roman tradition, that was broadly polytheistic. There were many gods who were fighting for their own turf. And Christianity considers polytheism just a stupid idea. How can there be many gods? And they said this was a primitive idea that was relegated to the dustbin of history by Christianity. But when those same Christians, as colonialists, they came to India, they thought that there may be 20, 30, 40, 50 gods in the Greco-Roman mythology. They came to India and there were millions of gods. And they said, one of them said, this is not just religious mythology, this is religious mythology gone insane. He says, why do you have so many gods? And they came to the same idea, that these are all false gods. And that's why they severely criticized it. Now, if we look, so this is the framework from which people approach this. One true God, many false gods. But if we consider the Vedic understanding, the Vedic understanding is that there is one supreme God and many subordinate gods. Many subordinate gods. So this Krishna, Vishnu, they are the supreme being. He's like the prime minister or the king. And the various devatas are like department heads. So each devata has his own department. So we could put it this way that, you see this? Consider, so Krishna is Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. He is the supreme Lord of everything. But by his arrangement, what happens by his arrangement is, Krishna doesn't directly get involved in the maintenance of the universe. So, he has given different portions of the universe, different areas. I don't have time to make circles all over now, but you get the point. That he has given different, these are all departments given to different devatas. So, in this system, there is not a competition between the devatas and Krishna. Now, of course, sometimes some of the devatas may start thinking that I am supreme, but that's a temporary misconception. Indra sometimes becomes proud, or sometimes some other devatas become like that. But as soon as they come to such a sense, they understand, I have power, Krishna is supreme. So there is no intrinsic competition. Krishna doesn't want the destruction of Indra. Krishna has only given power to Indra. So there are all these devatas who are department heads, and they help in the universal administration. However, that is not the only thing that they do. As I said, in the Abrahamic tradition, God is jealous. However, Krishna, he is not jealous. He is zealous. Zealous means what? He is eager for our elevation. He wants each one, everyone to become elevated. From wherever they are, just take one step forward. Now it is best, Krishna is eternal, we as souls are eternal. If somebody can worship Krishna, they can attain Krishna directly. But if they cannot, somehow they are not ready to worship Krishna, because as was discussed earlier, based on people's level of consciousness, different people may be attracted to particular forms. He says, okay, if you're not attracted to me, I will provide you many options. You respect any of them, you worship any of them, by that also you will get elevated. So, Krishna is not jealous, he is jealous about his glorification. I should be the sole supreme Lord. That is not Krishna's mood at all. Krishna is zealous about our elevation. He is concerned whether we get elevated or not, from wherever we are. So the idea is that the system of the worship of Devatas is created by Krishna himself. Now, this system is meant for elevation, but it can also lead to confusion. So let's see how this system is meant to work, and sometimes how it may not work. Has any of you heard the story of the prodigal son? You heard the story of the prodigal son? Okay. The prodigal son is basically a story from the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, which talks about God's great love for everyone. So there is a parent, father, a wealthy landlord, who has two children. Two sons. One of them is very obedient, the other is very rebellious. So then the rebellious son wants demand, give me all my property, all my inheritance. He says, I just want to be on my own. He says, no, please stay with us. What do you want? We'll provide. No, I want my inheritance. He insists. His father reluctantly gives, and he goes in. And because his money, he has many friends. So What is that saying? Where there is a will, there are many willing relatives. Many willing friends are will. Oh, you got money? I'll be your friend. So he finds like that. And he has many friends, and within he squanders all the money. And he squanders all the money, he loses all the money, he loses all his friends, and he's in a very pitiable condition. And finally he decides. He tries to serve other masters, but they're all very exploitative. Finally he decides, I'll go back to my father. I'll beg to him to forgive me. And when he comes back, his father welcomes him with open arms and celebrates the return of his son. And that is how it said that we may leave God, but God does not leave us. God always welcomes us back. So that is the story of the prodigal son story. It talks about God's love for human beings. Now that is true, but if you consider in real life, if a son has gone away, the father won't just wait for the son to come back. The father will work for the son to come back. So work for the son to come back means what? What the Vedic tradition says is that, say, if this is the king's palace, so suppose the father is a king, and this is the king's palace. So now beyond the king's palace is his kingdom. Beyond the palace is far bigger than his kingdom. So now the prodigal son has gone out of the palace. And not only has gone out of the palace, the prodigal son may go all the way out of the kingdom also. So when that person goes out of the kingdom, at that time that person is suffering. And now this earlier story says that if he comes back here, he is welcome. The father is welcoming. But if you consider if the father really cares, then that even if the son is somehow upset with the father, the son is angry with the father still cares for the child. So what the father does is, okay, here, now the son is here, the son has come here somewhere, and here he is trying to find some boss to serve, some master. He's trying to some master is trying to serve over here. So what the father will do is, the father will send his own minister. He'll say that, you want some work? You come and work for me. And when the son comes and works, what will happen is, the father sends a minister, said that there's a minister here. The son comes back to the kingdom. So this is a minister. Here is a king. The sizes are not illustrative now, but the principle is. So now when the son is serving the minister, he has not yet come back to the home, but he has come back to the kingdom. And in that way, he is indirectly under the care of the father. And the minister will be paying the son. But where does the minister get the money to pay the son? Ultimately, it's to the king, to the father. So in that way, this system of the minister acting as an intermediary between the son and the father, that also shows the father's love. Now, of course, the father would prefer if the son just comes back home. But if the son is not ready to come back home, then at least be within my care. Be within my care indirectly. So most of you must be guessing where we are going with this. Who is the father? Krishna. Who is the son? Yes, the lost souls, like all of us. And who is the minister? Yes, the ministers are the Devatas. So, the system of worship of the Devatas is arranged by Krishna. Krishna says, Mayaiva Vidanitam. It is I who arrange the system. It is I who provide the Devatas by the power by which they can fulfill your desires. Not only that, Krishna says, I make your faith strong in the Devatas. Yo yam yam tanum bhakta shraddhaya chitam ichchati. Tasya achalam shraddham tam ev vidhamyam. Krishna says, I will make your faith strong. Like when the king says, you minister, you go and meet my son. Say, you go in all pomp, in splendor, so that the son is convinced you are also a wealthy person. You can reward him properly, you can pay him properly. So, Krishna, Madhvacharya in his commentary on this verse writes, that it is Krishna only who has created the various Puranas in which the various Devatas are glorified. So there is Shiv Puran, there is Devi, books to Devi, there is Ganesh, books to Ganesh, and they all glorify these Devatas. And this is also the arrangement of Krishna, so that that person will become inspired, and that person will start worshipping, will come back within, Prabhupada says, the house of the Vedas, within the kingdom of Krishna. So going back to our starting verse, the son who is ready to come back to a minister, to work for a minister who works under the king, that itself is a son who is in the path of reconciliation with the Father. Similarly, Krishna is saying, those who worship the Devatas, they are in Sattva Guna. That means they are in relatively elevated consciousness. And they will ultimately come closer to Krishna through that. Now, of course, many of you may have heard the other verse of the Bhagavad Gita, which says that Alpamedhasa yepi anya devata bhakta, that those people who worship other the various devatas, they are Alpamedhasa, they are less intelligent. So now, are they in Sattva Guna or are they less intelligent? Or are they in Sattva Guna and less intelligent? Now, how does this work? So, whenever you have to understand scripture, context is very important. So, let's consider, say, a father has two sons. We'll continue the son metaphor. Say there is son 1 and there is son 2. Now, this person is very good in studies. And say, on average, in the exam, this person gets 100% marks. The other son who just scrapes 2 and gets 40% marks. Now today, the results have come. And both of them have got 70%. Now, if, say, son 1, son 2, if both of them have got 70%, now the father will say to the second son, well done, shabash. But to the first son, he says, what have you done? Badmash. He said. So now, for the first son will say, we both got the same marks. Why are you criticizing? Why are you praising? So why? Yeah, it depends on context. So for the son who was at 40%, 70% is a step up. For the son who was at 100%, 70% is a step down. So similarly, can you guess what is 100%, 70%, 40% are? Yes?
I think 100% is
Yes.
40% is
Yes, correct.
and 70% is Devata.
Excellent. You have a round of applause. So, the 70% is the worship of Devatas. 40% is atheism, materialism, any kind of things. So here, the verse we are discussing, Krishna in 17.4 is talking about these people. And those, at least they are in goodness because they are worshipping somebody who is representative of Krishna, who is appointed for Krishna. They are not just worshipping some product of their own imagination. So in that sense, that is a step up. But in 7:20 to 23, when Krishna is talking about it, another section of the Gita, he's talking somebody who has the potential to worship Krishna. If they give up the worship of Krishna and start worshipping someone else, then that is Alpamedhasa. Because why is that Alpamedhasa? It is not so much worship of the Devata that is Alpamedhasa. It is the conception with which they are worshipped. If one starts thinking that they are independent divinities, that they are themselves the supreme lords, then that is less intelligent. So I'll conclude with 2 points and then we can have some questions. See, it's interesting if we can take the one point that Krishna says that those who worship the Devatas are less intelligent. But you know what happens in the Bhagavad Gita itself? As soon as the Bhagavad Gita is over, the Mahabharata describes that Arjuna has become calm, Arjuna is ready to fight, and that time they see the goddess Bhadrakali in the air. And Krishna tells Arjuna, she has appeared now, satisfy her with prayers and seek her blessings so that you can take it. And Arjuna will say, Krishna, you just told me that is less intelligent. Why are you asking me to act less intelligently? He doesn't ask that. Why? Because for Krishna, for Arjuna there is no confusion. He is not worshipping Kali because he thinks Bhadrakali because he thinks that she will give some special blessing which Krishna can't. He is simply following Krishna's instruction. So there is no resentment or hate towards the Devatas in a devotee, nor towards the worshippers of the Devatas. They are at a particular level and Krishna has a path for them, a path and a plan for them also. So that's why how philosophy is to be practiced, to be applied, we have to look at how it has been applied in the past. Otherwise, we can come off as very insensitive, judgmental, fanatical, self-righteous. We just criticize anyone who is worshipping the God, that's less intelligent. No. That person may have been doing it in their family for many generations, that may be their tradition, family tradition. And they may be doing it with great reverence also. So as compared to somebody who is an atheist, a person who is worshipping Devatas is definitely much better. So our purpose is elevating others, not, it's more like educating and elevating others. It is not confusing and confounding others. So what do I mean by this? Confusing and confounding others. Say suppose somebody worships Ganesh very diligently, and we say that, oh, you should worship only Krishna. Ganesh is, it's all less intelligent. And we quote something from Bhagavatam and they quote something from some other Puran and somebody says this, somebody says that, and they get confused. And they start thinking, all this religion business is very complicated. It's simple to be an atheist. Let me forget religion. Then what have we done? In trying to pull that person from say 70% to 100%, what we ended up doing was, we pushed them down from 70% to 40%. And that is definitely unhealthy. So say if we are here and somebody is here, so our purpose is to bring them up. But sometimes we may just knock them down. We just make them atheists. And that should not happen. So Krishna clearly says in 3:26 in the Gita, don't disturb people's minds. That means if somebody has a particular level of faith, engage them in a way that it can be elevated. But don't disturb them. Don't disturb others. So this is how we should function. And last point I will make is that conceptions in worship of Devatas. When the Devatas are being worshipped, people can worship them with many different conceptions. And it is not just the fact of Devata worship that is important, it is with which conception they are worshipping. So, we could start from the most positive, and it's not necessarily most negative, but we can look at it. If somebody sees them as devotees of Krishna, or representatives of Krishna, then that is not at all an unhealthy way. Arjuna worship like that, the gopis worship like that, they worship Katyayani so that they would be Krishna as their Lord. So they say that these are particular devatas who have particular powers. They are given by Krishna. So now, do we have to go and worship them? Not necessarily. It's not that as devotees we have to go and worship all the devotees. But if that has been a part of our past culture, that is a part of our family, then they may be worshipping with a different conception, but we can participate in that worship with a more elevated conception, more enlightened conception. Then another conception could be that's what it does. That there is worshipping as departmental divinities. For worshipping Ganesh, for starting something we have to worship Ganesh. For this particular thing we worship those things. Well, that is okay. They're not really having the misconception that these are supreme. See, many times when people worship, they are not concerned who the object of worship is, as well as they are concerned what the object of worship can do for me. So whether you are supreme or not, I don't care. As long, can you help me? If you help me, I'll worship. So now somebody may have prayed to some devata, and they may have had their presence. It is Krishna who answered their prayers, but through the devata. Then they may have some faith. We don't have to disturb their faith. So this, okay, you're worshipping this body, that's okay. But the more important thing is, it's important that you worship Krishna. Now the first and second are related. But the first is more based on the devata's relationship with Krishna. The second is based on the devata's relationship with us. What they can do for you. Now beyond that, there could be, they can be considered independent divinities. Now this is somewhat non-philosophical. Because how can there be many independent supremes? There can be only one supreme. So this is generally non-philosophical. And they say, okay, you think that Ganesh is, you worship Shiva, I worship Ram, you worship somebody else. Okay, whatever. Let's do whatever you want. But how do you understand this philosophy? So most people don't care. But these independent divinities, they are worshipping, well, there is something questionable about that. And we need to help them as well as we can, rise to a higher understanding. But now this independent divinities, this conception is often associated with another conception. That is, they are just not representatives, but representations. Representations of Brahman. So this is the idea that ultimate reality is impersonal, and the various devatas, they are just representations of that Brahman. So in this case what happens is that a person says, you can worship whichever representation you like. And this is where sometimes the Guru may say, you can worship me also as God. Why? Because I'm also Brahman, Devata is also Brahman. So this is where sometimes chaos starts coming in. That's why it is this conception which is a misconception. So there is the English rough translation of this as demigod. See, words, their meanings change over time. When Srila Prabhupada used the word demigod, at that time, Prabhupada learned his English in 1920s and he wrote his books around 1960s. At that time, the word had a different meaning. Like Prabhupada also uses the word cult. The cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is spreading all over the world. If somebody asks you, so are you joining a cult? Will you say yes? No, because now we are not joining a cult. And more importantly, the word cult has acquired a very negative connotation. So in today's world, the word demigod, it is basically Greco-Roman word. The idea is that is when a god and a human, they have a combined child. That child is called a demigod. That is their idea. So like the Pandavas, the Devatas and Kunti, they came together and that's how they had a child. So in the way the word is used today, it has a very different connotation than what we have in mind. So that's why you might have noticed that I was using the word Devata throughout. So the idea is, when they see this as representatives of Brahman, then that becomes the idea that anybody can be considered to be God. So from demigod, we have something else is say me God. What does that mean? I am God. You worship me as God. And that is where it's like Prabhupada would say something, there are thousands of avatars being manufactured in India constantly. But that is chaotic. See, now Krishna is very compassionate. So Krishna engages many souls in his service by having many devatas. But these devatas are all, by their past punya, they have acquired certain posts in the cosmic administration. But that does not mean anybody imagines that person is the supreme. No, that is very different. So among these conceptions, we could say, these are a broad range of conceptions. Now this is not a problem at all. If you see the representatives of Krishna. And right, this is fine. This is okay, the department divinities. Independent divinities, that is a question. See, many Indians, many Hindus, they are not very philosophical. No, very few Indians or Hindus will say, if you say Krishna is God, no, Krishna is not God. They are not going to say that. They say, only Krishna is God. No. So they want to be egalitarian, but it is non-philosophical egalitarian. So this is not necessarily a problem, because it encourage them to worship Krishna. And as they worship Krishna, Krishna can do his magic. Krishna can give them the taste by which they can become elevated. And this is where the problem comes in. We said all the devatas are just Maya and only the Brahman is the highest. If that is a conception, then that conception has to be challenged. But the challenging can also be in a respectful way, understanding that they are within Krishna's plan. And we want to help them take a step forward, not push them backwards. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. Broadly, we discussed the system of the worship of the Devatas. The first point I discussed was the Abrahamic conception of the true God and false gods. And how from that tradition, there is a destruction of the false god which is necessary for the glorification of the true gods. That is not the Vedic idea at all. So within the Vedic understanding, we discussed that how Krishna's purpose is not his glorification, he's not jealous, he's what? Zealous. He is not jealous that nobody else should be glorified other than me, rather he is zealous that everyone be elevated. So even if you worship somebody else, still you be elevated. So we got the example of the landlord, the son, and the minister. The minister like the Devatas. Then, now we discussed we should follow Krishna's purpose. And Krishna's purpose means we should be elevating, not confusing or degrading people. So that means, we remember this one, the 100%, 70%, 90%. We should be elevating people from where they are, not pushing them down. Then, lastly I discussed that the conception with which, just the fact of Devata worship is not as important as conception is more important. And if the conception can be changed, then even Devata worship can be incorporated within the broad ambit of bhakti. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.